So let's just talk about. I think you had the idea that you wanted to basically do this matchup in particular, possibly driven by the fact that Jorg posted that guide as well about the blue red versus um, elves matchup. And so you suggested that we do some stream testing, a few games from each side, two matches from each side is what I suggested, and then talk about what happened after, what would happen or what happened afterwards, and if you have any new ideas on the matchup, just as a general, this is the most popular deck in Legacy, so it's good to try to learn the most about it possible.
For sure. I think what you said is mostly correct. The only thing I will just like amend to that, I guess, is
Mm-hmm.
the quick primer that Jurg posted. It wasn't a result of that. I didn't actually know he was working on that until I suggested this idea to you. But
Uh-huh.
both ideas are essentially from the same thing. I know he and other elf pilots have really been struggling with this matchup. Notably, I think he posted on his Google Docs that lately in like big events challenges, he's like 27% or something against blue red, which is like very low compared to the matchup historically. And the other thing I want to mention also is I think Inigo brought to my attention that especially when I'm not playing in the the showcases or whatnot. Like I didn't play this past Sunday, but
Mm-hmm.
I think on the whole recently, especially post Ragavan ban, Elf pilots have been like 30% in the matchup, which is like really bad. And then I think this past showcase it was like 22%, which is like doomsday level bad, according to Max Gilmore.
Mm.
So I brought it up because I brought the suggestion up to you because, and York did his primer because, like I said, the matchup I think has been really bad for the average elf pilot. So I wanted to explore this further.
Yeah, I personally think it's a pretty good matchup for blue red. I mean, obviously, it depends a lot on how much respect you pay to it in your sideboard. I think if
Mm-hmm.
literally the blue red deck didn't have any sweepers in its sideboard, it wouldn't be that good. But I think the fact
Mm-hmm.
that most people play one or two sweepers, like they actually have like real cards to side in, I think makes it a lot worse for you than probably before.
I would agree with that. I think the other thing too is, of course, pilot. I guess skill level and experience matters a lot,
Mm-hmm.
but I also think more so than before in the sense that just based on my observation and just watching other elf players play, each mistake is almost game losing, and it's almost impossible, I think, for the average pilot to play perfectly in this matchup, and also probably explains why the win rate is significantly lower. Obviously, the Delver pilot matters as well, and granted, my sample size is not as high as some of the data that is in challenges and whatnot, but I probably also, especially in leagues, um, I think the my opponent is probably not as experienced in the matchup as I am, which is I think why you were a perfect fit for this because
Mm-hmm.
you can play the deck from both sides, right?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't played Reclaimer Elves in a long time, so I'm not going to say I'm going to be a like 95 efficiency right off the bat, but I I think just in general switching sides of a matchup is underrated in terms of learning the matchup entirely. I think you have to play it from both sides to actually understand it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And with that said, I guess I want to mention, at least to my audience, Jarvis is going to be a lot better playing elves than I am playing with blue red. So for whatever that's worth.
Yeah. Um yeah, so that's about the intro I have to this. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to input here.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
neither do I guess. I gave a before I signed on this voice call. Um, I gave a quick intro to the list I'm playing. It's not really anything different than what I sent you
Hmm.
earlier
Right.
in the week, but I guess with that said, we can get started. I guess if that's the case.
Yeah, so I'm gonna mute the Discord for now, and then we can re-enable it to trade the decks after the first 2 matches.
Sure. Do you want to mute the Discord, or do you want to just disconnect?
I think just muting it makes more sense.
I'll
Alright, chat. So we'll have a few games for you in a second. Alright. So yeah, here we go. Alright. The first match. It's not the most insane hand, but I'm gonna keep. Sword Shepherd, huh? My favorite. Need that one. I might get Bog. Nope, we got Arbor. Okay. So they have 1, 2, 3, 4. No, they have 3 mana right now. They might have 4. Fine. Fine. Can't really do much about these anyways, so. What cards? Looks like I'm getting smashed this game, chat. Did bog me, yeah. Makes sense, honestly. That's not much help.
Hi Jarvis and chat.
Yo, what's up, XJ? Looks like I'm getting my shit beaten in this game. It's probably I'm supposed to just hope that the daisies are good, even though they're not likely to be good. Is what's probably supposed to happen. I should have killed this one, actually. That's a mistake. Because now I can't even get my 1 point of damage. Oh well. Alright. I'm probably gonna lose, but, you know, we can always hope for a miracle. It's fine. One, two. Oh, so there's 4. So the steps are 4, 5, 6, 7. Alright. Looks like Newton might just be flooded. Or something weird is going on, I'm not sure which. Probably just have to do this. You might as well do it now to just prevent them from reusing that elf if they want to. I think they're just flooded. That's the only reasonable explanation, I think. I'm wasting an Arbor because it's the one that taps for the most mana. Oh, I should have wasted on their turn, probably. That was a mistake. Fairly rusty right now. Alright. Still attacking 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. No, I should have wasted on their turn. Then an elf would be tapped, at least. Or actually, I should have just played the waste and said go. Okay. That's bad. Alright. Guess I'm probably dead now. I need, like, basically cantrip into an immediate Murktide or something like that. Basically, actually, I think the Wasteland thing cost me a lot. Because they basically had enough mana to play the Grist around double days, whereas if I wait to see if they activate for a Cradle, then I can waste the Cradle. No, it doesn't, in my opinion. I mean, I think you'll see... Like, that game was still close and my draw wasn't that good, right? This is also coming in. This is also coming in. What was I taking out before? Dazes are not spectacular, so I'm gonna cut 2 dazes. Wait, think about what happened that game. There was a giant glimpse, and the game was still close, essentially, right? Anyways, I sided out 2 days, a Brazen Borrower, and a Power Blast for Rough Tumble, and the Festivities, Snapcaster Mage, and Submerge. He missed half the match. Yeah, I mean, like, the reason he had so many resources was there was like a big glimpse on turn 2 or 3. And the game was still close besides that, despite that. This is not my favorite, but I'm gonna, like, unhappily keep. We're gonna need to draw a cantrip, an iteration. There's a cantrip, an iteration, or even a bauble would all be reasonable draws, so there's a lot of those in my deck. That's like 14 draws. I need to save this as an answer to Allosaurus Shepherd. That was a good draw, though. Like, kind of the worry was flooding out, honestly, but now it's going to be harder to flood out. Inquisitor, there's probably a non-zero amount of the time. It's just, like, kind of hard, because if they already have a land, it's kind of hard to, like, actually do anything, right? I'm just going to take the 1. I don't think that card matters as much as going either Shepherd or Reclaimer. Kind of a punish, I guess. Now, because of mana, I think I just have to kill the Heritage Druid. Otherwise, like, I want to cast this turn, that's why. And then another Vault. I'm looking for a Rough Tumbler and the Festivities mostly. Don't think I want any of these. Shuffle. Alright, Brainstorm's fine. I don't mind the extra land because of Mystic Sanctuary. Okay. Crazy to force this a little bit, yeah. I mean, the danger is Cradle. Okay, no Cradle. This is a Heritage, I'm definitely forcing it though. I think that's fine. So this will be a 6/6 Regent. I can Brainstorm ahead of it, make it 7/7. That probably matters. I don't really care. Like, I could waste that. I don't think I should do that. I think I should just play out all my threats instead. This turn. That's why I didn't even really consider the other thing. Oh, yeah, sure. I want to get this out to use that to surveil into more gas as well. So the plan is to, well, I guess we'll see what they do, but the plan is to cast Iteration next turn first anyways and see what happens, I suppose. Okay. I want Delirium to attack for 10. The Snow Island does absolute jack shit, so... I also believe in Murktide. If I get bogged, that's fine. The Murktide's still a 2-shot. Because if you bog me, a Daze and Iteration leave the graveyard. Yeah, exactly. So I'm not concerned about that, and they can't lethal me next turn. So I think I'm pretty safe. I mean, obviously they get to eat my Reclaimer, which is not great. Or my DRC, which is not the best for me. Question is if I should waste now, actually, I think. I think I'm supposed to waste now, only because of the fact that they can't even Reclaimer for the Cradle right now anyways. Oh, Cradle plus Shepherd kills me? I should have thought about that, probably. Oh yeah, it's pretty messed up. Alright, gotta force that, otherwise I lose the race. Yeah, Daze plus Sanctuary. That's why I don't side out Daze, all of the Dazes in some matchups. Like, in this matchup, Daze wasn't fantastic before, but, you know, I have 2 in my deck now. Anyways, also Sanctuary plus Murktide sometimes a combat trick. Well, sometimes, like, Sanctuary is actually pretty awful, but not enough of the time to not justify main decking it, I think is the best way of putting it. Alright, so that was game 2. Again, if you want to see the Elves side, check out twitch.tv/hellonewton. Use multi-Twitch to watch both, is my suggestion. I don't change anything. Like, Daze is still not great, but it has utility with the Sanctuary to, like, rebuy a Sweeper or something, so... Alright, this hand's pretty excellent. Sanctuary's better in Yorion decks? I don't know what that really means, actually. Oh, just because it's harder to draw? Well, Snapcaster comes in versus a lot of decks. I sided in this matchup as well because it's just Snap removal spell is powerful. But Snap Price of Progress is specifically for, like, 4-color Bant or whatever, you know? I think I'm supposed to Daze this, actually. I'll leave that one on top, though. I've had a pretty bad cough the past few days, so I'm still getting over it. I'll offer the trade. Alright, fine with that. Sure. So is this an endurance, probably? These would have been really good right here. Yeah, you would snuff out, right? Because it would... I mean, it felt like an endurance to me, but it also makes sense to do it first. They're low on resources, though, so kind of hoping that they just don't have enough to win. Okay. Yeah, I think it's interesting, but I had a read that that was going to happen, you know? We're gonna get 2 cards out of this. Fine. think the Reclaimer is actually more annoying. Which is kind of funny to say, but... Yeah, I think so as well. I was working it out. I'm just gonna leave that still. I'm just gonna waste the Cradle. Yeah, next turn I'll play the Iteration second main and try to figure something else out, you know? Glimpse. So it's just like a draw 2. They're just cycling their Glimpse essentially, which is fine. That's bad. Okay, now I'm fucked. So I have to iterate into removal spell plus land, essentially. Alright. Maybe it's better to brainstorm first, actually. Pedro, you got to cool with this calling. That's game shit. You just got to cool it. Shit. I was supposed to do the second main. All right. I have to keep that now because of that, which is really unfortunate. Okay, well. If I cast it now, I can even attack, right? I'm thinking about what I should do here. Probably put land under back. What a rough draw for the opponent, yeah. Oh wait, thanks Louis and XJ. Also, did my stream like flicker for a second? My Wi-Fi on the fritz? It did? God, I don't know why. Sorry. This is a fresh reboot. Everything I thought was fine. Commercial played? Okay. Alright, well, I'm looking for Submerge because that protects my creature from the most. I think I want that. Oh, I should have put the days on top to mill it. Whoops. Yeah, I was supposed to put the days on top to mill it, and I just didn't execute. But basically this game has gone around very quickly. So they redrew the endurance, so I know about it. Maybe. I didn't actually consider that, but it's gonna be fine. I can refill really quickly, so... I think I just, like, play the control route now, like, just kill a bunch of their shit. Like, this is fairly free. Oh, wait! Why don't I just bolt them? Whoops. I should have just bolted them. Clearly. No. That's fine. Pedro, you gotta cool it. Every time you've been here, you've just spammed shit that's very irritating. We can fix it, yeah. It's fine. So I was supposed to bolt them twice last turn, obviously, but... I think that was the first match? Yeah. So I took it in 3 games. I lost the first game. But, you know, I think the matchup is close. But I think generally my strategy is pretty good. It didn't even really matter that I didn't have early threats. It's just Murktide closes the game so fast. Alright. Second match. This is fine. They're blind. Myself. It's kind of an interesting one. I think what I'm going to do is put back Waste Ponder, Shotgun's team events, and reveal the Ponder to... No, I don't want to spew that Brainstorm. Like I said, you really got to cool it. Like, Your comments have driven me nuts. Waste pass is not good, I think. That's bad. Alright. Well, I am mostly dead now. Let's see, what can I do? I guess I could make a big Murktide and hope that's good enough. But that's basically all I can do. So I should actually fetch first to try to get more instants or sorceries, because I know my top card's a waste right now. Should probably do this second main, because what I need to do is probably waste this Cradle to stop Greater Hoof or even the Allosaurus activation. But right, well, is Archon and Valor's reach? Up for that. This is just buying time, unfortunately. I think I'm going to slowly die out, which is not great. Alright, I'm dead now. I'm always calling there, because I think just unlocking all the instants matters way more. I think it's like cowardly not to call. Alright. Same board plan. I'm in such terrible shape that it's correct to call. Right, exactly. So I have to block. No, I think I have to block. Because there's also, like... There's, like, actually a very outside scenario where... how do I explain it? This hand's really good, though. And block warriors? Sometimes. Basically block bolting any one drop here. That qualifies as some one drop to bolt. It was game one, Tommy Harding, but It is a reasonable point if it was a post-board game. I think I just put back the bauble. Mystic Sanctuary seems very good with Brainstorm. It's good with Daze, too. And it's kind of useful. I'm considering forcing this, actually. Is that crazy? I'm gonna force a pitching iteration. I could also force pitching Brainstorm, actually. Might be better. I'll just take my 2 for 1. I'm not gonna get greedy there, because if they have a Cradle, it's just too much. This has been a weird game. I need that one. I need that one. I think I'm actually okay trading. Right. I bolt. I think I'm just gonna bolt the symbiote. In which case, maybe I should have done that after no blocks were declared. I don't think that does much, actually. Alright, so I missed out on 3 damage. Kinda sucks. Or 2 damage, rather. No, I think the way Newton plays, he tries not to have natural orders in his deck postboard in this matchup. For a second, I got confused, and I'm just like, wait, why can't I get my Mystic Sanctuary? But that's because Boseiju lets you get Mystic Sanctuary. Right. This is what I got. I'm not sure if siding out all the no's is good. This is a sign of desperation. Sage who endures. It's not what they want right now. Brainstorm is what I want right now, though. I think it might have... I don't know. It was probably just like a second Cradle in hand, for sure. Glimpse is possible as well. Alright, actually... Will I win this game 3? It's going okay, Snow Schwartz. How are you doing? Anyways, get your bets in. Will I win this game 3? Endurance in hand. Right, good to know about. Virtual Rangers. Not gonna bolt that. I think that's like the least important elf, really. Excited for one man negate? Not particularly. I think other people are more excited than I am. Alright, don't have days this time, fortunately. Just gonna cast Brainstorm. I think it's too debilitating. Right. This is bad news bears. Once Upon a Time? Should draw that though. There's Once Upon a Time. Interesting. So I actually considered, well, actually, never mind. I have a lot of work to do now, unfortunately. Just a lot of big creatures, 2/3/4s. I only have a 1/1. Murktide's gonna have to do a lot of heavy lifting. I believe in the card though. Yeah. Fog. Might be dead? No. Like, that's one issue I have with the way he sideboards. He can't really ever present, like, a bullshit win. Is like, actually a big problem, I think. This is getting problematic, though. I might be dead to all of the endurances before anything else happens. I wonder if you're supposed to endurance yourself. I guess that would shrink the Reclaimer, so probably not. So what's my out? Alright. I think I figured it out. Try like cantrip, do something spectacular. That's not it. I'm probably dead now. That specifically need to be like cantrip into something good. All right. I think that game was a good show of the power of Wirewood Symbiote Elvish Visionary more than anything else. I think that was really the only thing that mattered. The other things were kind of just all distractions, but Symbiote Visionary was assembled multiple times, and like while I had a bunch of one for one removal, inherently one for one removal is not a good plan versus the Visionary stuff. Alright, so we're going to trade the decks real quick.
Sounds good. I have you on the line still. So I just unmuted.
Yeah, I unmuted as well. I need to put the Delver deck into a trade real quick.
All good.
And can you paste the .deck file?
Oh, here you mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
I will do that.
So 1-1 in matches as blue-red. So we're going to switch sides now, chat. Alright.
Perfect. That makes it easier. We can just straight swap 75, 75.
I'm gonna take a few seconds to go to the restroom and get some more water. I have a bit of a sore throat. It's actually been driving me crazy, but so I'll be
Okay,
right
no worries,
back.
man. Hey, thanks for being a trooper.
Alright, chat. Thanks for everyone being here. If you want to support the stream, hit that follow button. That's free to do. If you really want to support the stream, check for this Twitch Prime subs. We're about to play the elf side of the blue-red matchup, so that should be fun. I haven't played this deck in a while.
We would address in the post-mortem afterwards. Whereas, so I was the beneficiary of being on the draw. Sorry, be on the play both matches, which obviously helps. Also, we kind of had, especially both game ones, there's a strategic standpoint advantage of knowing there's no sweepers game one. typically speaking. I mean, I've seen that the one list that had 2 End of Festivities main, like I think a few months ago, but that's rare.
Anyways, I'm back now.
Hey, welcome back.
So I think I'm ready to play the other side now. If you're ready.
Cool. Yeah, I will put you on mute now, and then I'll go ahead and create the match again.
All right. All right. This seems like a keep to me. The question is what cards you want to play on what turns. I'm actually inclined to Zenith for Arbor in turn 1 with this hand. Just kind of funny. I'm gonna like. Yeah, I mean this is definitely a keep. The question is how you play it. Steam vents means they probably don't have a lot of lands because this is such. You don't generally play this land on turn 1 if you can avoid it. Right. Yeah. No, I'm definitely gonna Zenith for Dried Arbor. This list cannot really win on turn 2. I mean, you can get like an effective win on turn 2 by spamming the board, but this list doesn't have any Nettle Sentinels max, so it's Newton's list. I mean, I didn't change it whatsoever. Birchlore. I wish the Arbor was in my hand because I actually would Zenith for another Arbor here, but so I'm gonna do this. What does Julian have to say about all this? I don't know. Julian says whatever he wants to say personally. I'm not the boss of Julian. Looks like a Murktide, right? That is a 3-shot Murktide as currently stands, but I don't really want to go long. Alright. I think I'm just gonna play this. If they daze it, that's fine. Whoa, they forced that? I wouldn't have forced it if I were them, honestly, but that's fine. Get out. My mana is like really constrained right now, so I think I should just play out my shit, you know? think forcing that glimpse was not. I think you were supposed to do that actually, but was pitched a ponder. I guess so, Snow Schwartz, but I feel like you can just do better, you know? God, Iteration is such a broken card. Also, the art is kind of gas on this card, for what it's worth. Does someone buy you? Oh, let's see. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 mana. If I Zenith, maybe this is just a play Gris sack Birchwar angle. Can I do anything else? Let's see. I Zenith for 1, I won't have enough mana. So I guess it's just Grist, sack Birchwar. Kill that and say go. I could know, but I'm currently dying to the Murktide, so knowing it isn't even good, I think. Basically, you could like Zenith for Heritage and cast Natural Order, but it's not even close to lethal or anything like that, so I don't see the point. This is a Reclaimer angle. It might be a Reclaimer angle. Reclaimer. It's just Reclaimer, probably. Could also get Symbiote for Glimpse, but I think Reclaimer is just correct. Okay, so Newton didn't know, or he doesn't want to. You can Sanctuary Iteration on top to a guarantee Delver Flip. But yeah, you definitely don't want to draw that Force of Will. I think regardless, you were actually supposed to just put Sanctuary. You were supposed to put Iteration on top, no matter what, to guarantee it. Because your thing still flips anyways, so it's fine. That's bad for my health. Looks like Well, it looks like I can't do much. I'm drawing land there is basically lethal. Cheeky Pyroblast is Surveil. Alright. Alright. I didn't draw land and I died. Well, Newton never drew a hand that looked like this, I feel like. In the small number of games we played. Like, that just didn't actually happen. You know? I'm gonna shave on those. I don't like them as much. I'm gonna leave one no in the hoof because I think this is actually like a valuable way to win some unwinnable games. You could also like justify having all of these and this. I think that plan's actually too slow versus Murktide on average that I don't really want to rely on it. But I do think the removal is actually good. I don't really like this card. This is like kind of a risky one to get forced, to be fair. But, you know, kind of is what it is. Also, I just noticed there are no Quirion Rangers. Yeah, I think it's wrong, Feingersh, but if it's wrong, it's not wrong by a lot. My issue is, I think it's very possible to, like, no prog versus a Murktide and still die. I'm not surprised Newton said, I'm going to leave one, because I think I value it. Like, it's just, like, a good emergency button to have. If you only leave one in your deck, it's harder to screw you as well. Right, yes. First. I think I'm gonna keep, but it's not like the most insane hand. Just think any hand with Cradle and a 1-drop is just like kind of broken. So basically, if you want me to mulligan this hand, I just don't want to play this deck. I think that's how I feel about it. All right. Yeah, we got a Shepherd. We got a Channeler. Right. That was a good draw, actually. Now is obviously when I wish I had Proj in my deck. Or not. Yo, tutors, thanks for the raid. We're doing a matchup breakdown. Elves versus Blue Red Delver. I played the Blue Red side for the two previous matches, and we went 1-1. And now I'm playing the Elf side. Thanks for everyone coming from Tutors stream. How was your stream? You got crushed in the Legacy room. See, that sucks. But you can't win all the time, right? I think I'm just gonna bog them and wait one more turn on this glimpse. Maybe I'll draw like another 1-drop creature. If you lose yourself, did you also technically win? That's a good ethical question. An excellent ethical question. This is looking pretty bad for me. Not gonna lie. Could be that they're out of gas now, though. Well, forgot that it's like basically impossible to run out of spells ever. But DRC is just like so impossible to run out. Kind of seen that happening here. Yeah, it's not going good. Alright, so what I need to have happen a bunch of stuff. I don't know, like drawing pretty dead by this point, I think. This is 1, 2, 3. So I guess no for endurance buys me in turn because I block there, go to 1. But then I'm like basically in the same spot. But I guess it's better than dying, right? But I also have to block the 1/1s then, so I'm drawing dead. Onza D has rubbed off on me? How so? When did I say ethical question? too smart. He figured out that if you attack with everything, then I have to block everything, so that's just the correct play. And I'm drawing dead now. Wow. He just had it all. Holy shit, I was dead by a lot. Alright. Last match, then we will review the matches. Alright. One less prediction for the night. I believe I've lost actually all 4 die rolls. Not that it really matters, but it is just a funny. Oh, he also realized that I lost all the die rolls. Alright. Well, this hand sucks, so this hand's fine. I'm just gonna ship the Boseiju. Alright. My elf has died. Fine. If you want to daze this, that's fine. Nice. Now I get dazed. They spend a lot of time wheel spinning. I'm much happier about that because I think that's a game that Elves is a lot better set up to play. Then I'm gonna Zenith for 1 here. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna Zenith for 1. It's Allosaurus, Shepherd, or Symbiote, or Reclaimer. Am I supposed to just get Reclaimer and plan for a few turns from now? Or should I just get Symbiote? Well, I already have another Visionary in hand. Maybe I should just take the Allosaurus Shepherd. It's kind of tricky, actually. Alright, I'm gonna take Shepherd, but I'm not sure. Definitely a close decision there, I believe. Draw. Bolts are gone too. Alright. I think I can delay a turn on this Grist, essentially. plan is to use Grist to kill the Murktide. Okay. Nice. It all worked out. And my 2 damage. Okay. Another Murktide, probably. Hoof is in the graveyard now, unfortunately. They're attacking me. Huh. Okay. They do have a bolt for the Grist. Alright. Not so much. I have to fade a turn anyways. Let's see. I guess I just get Archon, name instant, and they can't really attack me. So I guess that's the plan. Oh, also it says vigilance as well. Weird. What is Archon of Vigilance? Does anyone know? Guess it didn't matter that my hoof got milled. It's probably one of the reasons he feels like he can get away with not. Maybe I'm not allowed to cut OAT, actually. Because it can't name creatures and needs to be creatures anyways? I guess. I'm skeptical of that reasoning, but... Alright, I think I am going to shave the second OAT. I think this is just a nice safety valve to have, personally, in like an elongated game. But maybe that's crazy. Yeah, this hand's fine. Shepherd is just so insane versus them. Even, like, it's weak versus sweepers, obviously, but besides that, it's just so insane to make sure your things cannot be forced or whatever, you know? Chose to shuffle probably just means no red source, honestly. I think this is just an endurance angle. I'll play around days. Okay. Not gonna play around the nightmare scenario. If it happens, it happens. It's just way too good for me if I that doesn't happen to me, rather. All right, let's think about it. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, potentially 8 mana total. So I think I'm going to lead off with Elvish Visionary. Then Zenith for on. I have enough. So I have 1, 2, 6. So I could Zenith for. I don't have any really good 2-drops in the deck. I guess I could Zenith for 1. Okay, that's what I'll do. I'll Zenith for 1 to get Symbiote. It actually. Oh, I have 4 Endurances in my deck. That's not the issue. Um. Oh! No! Alright, actually it works out, but I fucked up slightly. I can't get dazed here, Adam. Please get dazed, no justice. Daze is not a concern. This has to be killed first. But I still should have floated first anyways. No, he cannot daze my Zenith. This card is nonsensical. Alright. Alright. That's all I have. I mean, a sweeper is bad for me, but it's not the end of the world. Also, Allosaurus Shepherd gets around Chalice of the Void, which is real nonsense. Like, this card is just like a nonsensical card. Yes, if they had Submerge, I would have gotten totally fucked. I bore down to 2 dazes in the matchup, yeah. You have to leave Force because you actually need to force a Zenith from 1. Alright, there's a Submerge. Even target. There goes my Cradle. But that's fine, I have a backup one. Did they not cast a Submerge? Why didn't they cast their Submerge? In any case, I'm picking up my Visionary. I guess they're gonna Submerge now? They were just waiting to see if I would pick something up? I don't know, that was super weird. Alright. Alright. Yeah. This is a good way to start. Yeah, I didn't really understand this submerging of whatchamacallit. Alright, I'm gonna use my floating mana to just hard cast Snuff out, I think. This is like the only spell they can force a will, so it doesn't really matter. But I think giving myself paying 4 life to do that is not worth it. Alright. Guess I have no attacks. I'll wait for them to suicide attack. Yeah, but it's better for me to just, like, get the draws. Like, mana was not my limiting factor, so I think picking up my Visionary was just correct, you know? What's this? Oh, is it just a mistap Murktide? Okay, they're tapping correctly for Murktide. Yeah. Right, Mize. I have a lot of mana this turn, so this probably will lead to a win. Though, wonder if I'm just gonna run into the issue that um oh, was he Dob? Why was he Dob? It doesn't palm. Did I actually miss it? Hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4. You block here, here. You take 5, 15, 16. No, wait, you take. Okay. Okay, no, I. Okay, yes. I believe you are correct. Okay. But now that we're here, let's see. What's it? I mean, I think they're probably still dead. I can just make like an unbeatable board instead. Oh, it was only 16? Yeah, I mean, I think we're still going to win regardless in that scenario, but, it would have been better if I hadn't derped, right?
Yo, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Cool. Actually, before we forget, you want to just go ahead and exchange the deck stack?
Yeah. Sorry, let me make the binder real quick.
Sure, sure. So good games. I think overall, I think probably learned a lot, especially from the Delvers that are playing this.
Yeah, pretty much. I feel like, I feel like you didn't realize how broken the deck was until you actually played with it just now, right?
So I didn't want to be completely lost in our match today, especially since like I haven't played too much Delver on Moto, so like
Right.
I know the interface with Ponder is like I'm not used to it if that makes sense. So I just
Right.
played one quickly yesterday just to
Oh, I see. I
make
see.
make sure that I don't put the wrong thing on top and things like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the deck is really,
But
really, really, really good, as you can tell.
it is. I agree. Like the floor is just so high.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know if you could tell, you basically just never get flooded or screwed, barring, like, I think in that game, I pegged you as having kept a hand with no red.
I didn't have okay, so I led with the island and then just whiffed off the ponder to find the rest of the hand was fine.
Yeah.
And I just whiffed off the ponder and I just like, oh shit, I'm probably just gonna straight up lose this game now.
The deck sees enough cards, even with one land, that I think you can generally work itself out, but,
Uh
um, so let's just recap all of the games real quick.
sure.
The first match, let's see what happened. Let me try to remember.
The first
First,
match I was fortunate to be on the play
so
both.
actually, it's kind of funny. Technically, MTGO just handed you all 4 die rolls, but I mean, obviously, it doesn't. That can happen in a tournament, but I do think that Elves versus Delver, especially in game one, the die roll matters a fair amount.
Correct. I would agree with that. Because as the elf player, from a strategic standpoint, you know there's no sweeper, so you just want to just flood the board. So
Yeah,
and there's no punish, right? And I think as an elf player, you really do not want to lose game one.
right.
I mean, in general, but
Yeah. So I was trying to. I mean, I think I lost game one because like I actually think I was kind of close because you flooded the board off a glimpse, but then you seemed to have not that much towards the end. Then I barely lost because like my Murktide got killed or something. I don't really remember. And I think the other two games just showed how good like I think a lot of this Delver sideboards look like this, but having just like Rough Tumble and the Festivities, Submerge, and the Snapcaster Mage are all pretty valuable. Just
mm-hmm.
like in addition to just like having extra copies of your sweepers, having extra copies of your important removal spells, or even just like even burning you out matters because like I am I correct in saying that you don't play Scavenging Ooze anymore?
That is a correct statement.
Yeah,
The reason being is because, as you can imagine, it lines up really poorly with Murktide and Delve threats in general,
right,
because you just do not have the mana to just continue to eat there and then not progress your board.
right. I mean, like the obviously the counter argument is like, okay, it gains you life, it's great, but like, I kind of feel like the games nowadays are so like snowbally that using mana to try to go after the graveyard doesn't really work out well for you.
Agreed. That's the reason why I stopped playing. I just realized it just doesn't like endurance just does what it does for way more efficient, right? Granted, not at instant speed.
Right. Okay. So let's see what else happened. The second match.
Actually, one quick thing. Um, just so everybody, full disclosure to everybody at least, from my perspective, I definitely misplayed that game to the first match against you. I don't know if you had any like small mistakes you want to just mention to because I have you on stream on my stream at the moment too, right? If you want to point anything out from your side.
I mean, I definitely made some small mistakes. Some that
Mm-hmm.
I caught immediately, and some that I think were just judgment calls. Um.
Uh-huh. So the big one I had game two against in the first match against you was I elected to bog and I just didn't think it through. I should have endurance because if you force that, you get the damage from the DRC. I don't know if you remember the boards there or not. From the DRC and the Murktide through, but then I had a follow up grist that I can take down at least the Murktide, the Falling Tree. But because I made the wrong play, you could just force the one spell instead of having to do both. If that makes sense.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah, that makes more sense. Um, a lot of times I'm just fine with my DRCs being eaten by endurances. If you notice that,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a lot more willing to let them go than I think some of the other Delver players are, because I don't think
Mm-hmm.
generally a random DRC attacking you for damage actually matters that much.
I think it depends on the hand and the play style. I think I have definitely, from my perspective, lost to my fair share of like either double DRC, double Delver, or 1+1 on the and they're on the play, right? Where I just get like essentially aped out for all intents and purposes. So those are the hands I tend to lose to, in my experience against a Delver.
Right. Um. So yeah, I think I'm trying to remember the second match, game three, just showed how powerful the symbiote visionary engine is. Because I think I cast both of my sweepers that game, and you still
Mm-hmm.
had plenty of stuff. Like, not even close.
Yes. Yeah, I think the thing is like, and I think you probably agree. I think as with most decks, the way you attack elves is you hit their mana because if they have the mana, they could just outgrind you in most circumstances. Obviously, top deck mode is a different circumstance, but in general, what do you think about that? Because of the how that game three played out.
I think Elves is underrated in how well it can grind, yeah. Yeah, I don't really have much to say about that. Um I feel like the first match I played against as Elves versus you,
Mm-hmm.
I think I didn't run very well in the games that were played. Is how I would
Yeah,
put it.
it looked like you were stuck on mana game one, was it? I don't
Yeah, when
remember.
when I mean I can just recheck real quick, but I
Sure.
think basically My opening hand was quite good. Like in game
Mm-hmm.
one, it was Birchwood Rangers, Zenith, Shepherd, Arbor, Bayou, Heath, Glimpse of Nature, which you can never
Mm-hmm.
mulligan versus anyone. So,
Mm-hmm.
and you led with Steam Vents, and the only way you lead with Steam Vents is if it's your only land besides Wasteland, or your only other land is like Mystic Sanctuary or something like that.
So I led with it personally because I think at the time my other land was a fetch, so I wanted to cantrip into fetch the following turn. It was my logic.
Hmm. I think versus virtually everyone, the life loss is likely to cost you more, but I don't know. Like
I
it
think in this
depends.
matchup, usually not, but that was at least my logic. I don't know if it was correct or not.
Right.
If you had seen my hand.
Right.
One thing I did want to ask you about though was I noticed when I sideboarded against you with your configuration, what do you prioritize taking out? Because I think that the cards I brought in were the Submerge, obviously, and the two sweepers. I thought about the Snapcaster, but opted not to. In hindsight, I think I would have changed that. And I boarded out obviously the Pyroblast, I think the Borrower, and the in 1 days. And
I
in hindsight,
I
maybe I bring out 2 days.
I just side out 2 days plus the extra cards you listed.
Okay, perfect. Okay, that
So
sounds
yeah.
exactly. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, that's it. Oh, I'm rewatching this game one. You wasted
Uh
my
huh.
second. You wasted my cradle, and I lost because of it. Because my hand was just like natural order glimpse, visionary symbiote by the end that I didn't get to deploy.
Yeah, that's actually something I wanted to bring up. The a point of contention at the moment with how to sideboard and play the deck is regards to the natural order package. I noticed you kept it in.
I
Was that
didn't. I didn't keep all of it in. The way I explained it to my chat
okay?
is I left in one buff, one uh natural order.
Okay, that's fair. And then I'm assuming you probably boarded out some number of heritage instead, then, right?
No, I let's
Okay,
see. Let me. I can tell you what I did. Let me
sure,
just
sure. And
click in it real quick.
right.
I cited out two natural order, one archon,
Mm-hmm.
the collector oof.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, that's four.
That should be four, yeah.
So and I want one, two, three, four, five, six. I'm gonna point this out. I don't think snuff out's great because I think paying life to kill their stuff is not where you want to be.
Okay, so that's something Max has brought up with me as well. My logic for playing it at the moment is because what I've found is, especially for other elf players, is it's very difficult to win when you're on the draw. And I think the other thing is, with regards to Murktide region, it often doesn't really change the clock because you're taking 7 or 8 each time.
Mm-hmm.
So that is my logic for it. And so far, at least, it's played out okay. Granted, the sample size is very low, and I think I only mentioned this either to you like earlier this week or at the latest earlier last week.
Okay,
But
I
that is at
yeah,
least the logic,
right.
huh?
I figured out what other two cards I cut. I cut two OATs, and I know you hate doing that, but I actually have reasonable logic for it.
Okay, go ahead. I
Okay,
mean, this could be interesting for my
so
audience here.
I'll explain my logic for that. Is I think
Uh-huh.
uh it's there's multiple ways to view it. Yes, okay. I think the best way of putting it is my opening hand. If there's no odd in it, great. That's fantastic. That's like probably you know whatever percentage of a land slash elf you need it to be. If you draw it later, that's not great. But I kind of think what happens a lot in the post board dynamic is that you're not necessarily looking for very specific cards very often. You're just looking for a quantity of cards because the way that this list is designed to sideboard is you just want to play a card economy game most of the time. And I kind of think like once upon a time isn't even that necessary in those sorts of games. Your land count's high enough, so the only reason to have four OATs in your deck, in my opinion, is if you really think the only way you can lose is to getting mana screwed in the matchup, and I don't think that's even remotely close to true.
Okay, so I think okay, so you hit that part. That part is definitely accurate in the sense that The reason why I keep all four once upon a time, and actually went up to four from three before, and actually even went up, a land count, because I think when I incorporated the once upon a time package, I was on 20 lands. Obviously, three of them are two arbors and one bog, but from my perspective, yeah, I found the only way, or not the only way, the easiest way to lose is just to not hit land draws and then hopefully get to the late game. But like you said, that could be a point of contention because that's not necessarily true. That if you get to the late game, you're essentially very likely to win. I think that's dependent on a few things. One of them is like obviously, pilot,
Mm-hmm.
but obviously what your opponent's sideboard could have as well.
Yeah. So like, I kind of feel like, hmm, I don't think having sometimes it's just a mystery box card. Like, I guess this is a question I was meaning to ask you. Do you keep
Mhm.
zero lander with OAT? Like, if the hand's otherwise strong?
So if I would keep under normal circumstances, if that once upon a time is let's just say a fetch or a bayou, right? Then yes, I would keep. So for instance,
Mm-hmm.
if the rest of the hand is just like visionaries, warwoods, natural order, and just like no other land, I would not keep that
Sure.
even if that was a land, if that makes sense. So I wouldn't keep it with the once upon a time. But assuming the once upon a time hits, and based on the fact that you have roughly 80%, I think it's like 75 at the moment, or
I'm
sorry,
gonna
around 80% chance of hitting the initial mana source, I would otherwise keep, yes.
I'm gonna just check the math on that real quick. One, two, three,
Sure. I
four, five,
think at
six,
the
seven, eight.
moment,
8, 9, 10. Yeah, well,
you have
you have
14
12.
IMS.
No, you have 12. Oh no, you have 14 because of the Besagers. You know
Hmm.
that number used to be a lot lower. I feel like
Which number?
the how many untapped green sources you had.
It was 13. Like I said, I added
Okay,
one Boseiju because uh like I've swapped. I want to play as many Boseijus as possible because I think
sure.
the card is really good.
Mm-hmm.
So I cut a creature for the essentially the 14th IMS. It was 13 before.
Okay, I see. Um, it's actually 79.9% to hit off an OAT. So
Okay, so just
I
under
think
80.
basically on the draw, I guess that makes a lot of sense because A, you have your draw step, which contributes
Hmm.
a lot, and B, then you have this like extra uh 80%. And like I guess technically a good way of viewing it is suppose you just counted your draw step plus OAT, you're up to like 86% to hit, and
Right.
untapped. I think on the
But,
play it's like kind of interesting if you're supposed to keep or not.
mhm.
And I don't know how often does it happen to you that people just counter your OATs? I would guess almost never, right?
Almost never. I think the only time I've ever really seen it be really popular was right before Dreadhorde got banned. So I think this was right after the 2020 Mox event that I played. So I had
Right,
taken a break from Legacy, and I
right.
came back and I'm like, what is going on? People are countering my Once Upon a Times, and then it makes sense though, right? Because they want to just aggressively push the Dreadhorde Arcanist
I
to the
see.
finish line, so to speak. So I think that would probably be the highest time where I got Once Upon a Time countered, but that was also a very specific metagame because it was, like I said, right before Dreadhorde got banned.
Okay, I see. So yeah. Let me try to remember what else happened in those games. Oh, the last match we played was kind of a joke. I don't know. Like, I just basically had pretty good elf draws, and
Hmm.
you couldn't really handle everything. I think
Yeah,
I put
but
this well, sorry. I put this best before for Blue or Delver. I think a lot of the games
mhm,
Blue or Delver the Blue or Delver really needs a mix of reactive cards, removal, and threats to win most
mhm,
games. In the Elves matchup, it can be skewed a little bit less on threats and more on card advantage slash Murktides. Like I don't really care about a
mhm.
random DRC or Delver. Those can just like go go fuck off because they don't kill fast enough. I mean, obviously, if you have like three of them by
Yeah,
turn
two is
two,
different, right?
yeah, if you
Huh?
have
Yeah.
multiples of them by like turn two, then sure, that's like a reliable game plan. Otherwise, I think what happens is you get your opponent down to like you know
8 or
12,
something, right?
yeah, 12 or 9, and then you actually have to like find the missing points some other way. Um, especially with endurance involved, like I
That's what I kind of felt too from I think the match number 3. So the first one I was on from playing from the blue red side.
yeah,
In game 2, I was at a point where I was like, okay, the floodgates are starting to open. I have to just essentially go all in on trying to get the last few points of damage in, and that's why I
yeah,
slammed the Murktide right off. I think I
hmm
pondered or iteration, and I was just like, well, one chain line is not going to get there, so I just have to essentially hope I can go wide with the flyers, and then like you can't deal with them all because essentially shields were down after the initial mana disruption, if that makes sense.
yeah. So for those of you who are wondering, I think I don't really care about the exact win percentage of decks or whatever. I think it's more important to realize how the games are won or lost from both sides rather than what the win percentages are. So that's really what we're discussing right now. And I think basically we're discussing the fact that it doesn't really matter. Your like one drop threats don't really matter in the matchup. Obviously, like if you can stick one in and it kills your opponent, great. That's a win. Like you take those, but I'm just saying, especially in a post board game when there's like 4 endurance, that's not very likely plan. And in fact, you should probably be wary of endurance and not just like drive your creatures straight into endurance because I think throwing cards away is a good way to lose as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think endurance. I mean, I want to give since you're on my you're also someone who's on my stream at the moment. You the shout out. Jarvis was actually the first person who messaged me upon the endurance spoilers saying, I think this is gonna be archetype defining for elves. And sure enough, it took a while, but the incorporation of endurance means that you have just so much flexibility in the sideboard now to address that you bring it in against Euro decks and graveyard decks or Doomsday, obviously, but then the ability just to go to board out, as much or if you want any of the natural order package as you want is a big flexibility option, if that makes sense.
Someone in my chat just asked, "Do you cast upkeep a lot in Legacy because of days?" I would say generally yes, especially if you're keeping a zero lander.
So okay, I think that depends on the person. I generally do not because I do not want to tip my hand that I kept a zero lander. So I always try to play the same way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think that actually makes sense because, like, I think if you give them the information that you don't have any lands by casting it during their upkeep, like,
Hmm.
I don't. Alternatively, you could always just cast it during their upkeep and balance your range that way. Like, I don't think it really the only time it's better to do it on your turn really is
Hmm.
because you get a little bit more information because of your draw step. So if you know your opponent doesn't even play like a blue deck, then it's probably just correct to wait 100% of the time anyways. So I think like just saying doing it the same time every time doesn't actually make
Hmm.
sense because you should actually do it differently based on what you expect your opponent to do.
I think that's fair. I also depends if people start. Thank you for the follow, Sven. Prop. I think it also depends if people start to counter my once upon a time. Generally speaking, it doesn't happen. So if people start doing that, then I may do it. But for the most part,
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really seen people aggressively counter once upon a time for what it's worth.
Okay,
They will
fair
generally
enough.
counter my one drop if it's not Shepherd, obviously, if anything.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I kind of feel like I don't besides missing lethal that one turn, but I think you were just
Hmm.
unfathomably dead that match anyways. Like, I mean, I think
Agreed.
basically I threw 100% away to go to like 95% or whatever, which is bad obviously, but it's not. I mean, I think I was probably going to win a staggering large
So,
proportion of
so
the
I
time.
mentioned this. Yeah, I mentioned this to my chat actually when you uh miss lethal. There was also a point where you bounced your visionary and then played a cradle and tapped it. What you should have done was actually
I
played
was
the
supposed to
cradle.
float. I was supposed to float. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No,
So
I
I
I
figured
knew.
you probably realized that afterwards, but I actually mentioned to my chat that even though Jarvis just missed lethal, we're 100% still dead. Like because the Wirewood is gonna continue to essentially eat us alive with a
Hmm.
visionary, right? Like that. Like I'm not gonna
Yeah.
even be able to stabilize, even if I found End of Festivities, for instance. I made the mistake of pitching the ponder to find the out, but again, like you said, I was probably dead regardless because I didn't have the start. Essentially, missing the volcanic island early just set me too far back.
Yeah, I've thought about this before if you should just side out Snow Island, but then I remember that people just play trophies, so like you can't really side it out because just giving up that free card is a little bit too much.
Right, right.
Um,
That's something I was gonna ask you about if you thought it was worth it, and especially if you know your opponent does not have trophy, for instance.
well, there's also the issue that sometimes happens. Less so versus this matchup, but sometimes you just
Mhm.
serve Veil way too many fetchable sources, so you kind
Sure,
of
sure.
need enough in your deck. That's the reason that I don't think you can really go below like 6 fetchables. Period.
I, I
Um.
think your list has 7, right?
Okay.
If
Yeah,
I
it has
remember.
7. It has the Mystic Sanctuaries the seventh. Yeah, that's right.
Mhm.
Yeah. I guess you can't really go below 6 for sure, but 7's
Mhm.
safer, and the Snow Island does enough that I think you're supposed to have it in this matchup.
That and the sanctuary is also just dead right early. Well, when I
Well,
say dead, awkward is probably the right word.
the Sanctuary's dead early, but I think it's just if you've ever watched these blue red Delver mirrors play out now, there's the
Mhm.
Sanctuary is so important for the games that basically there are two types of Delver games now. I think it's someone gets killed on turn 4, and the other ones go to like turn 20. And if you
Yeah, yeah,
don't
yeah.
have Sanctuary in your deck for the games that go to turn 20, you actually just auto lose. Like it's not even
No,
close.
no, you brought up a good point. Like the game one in match 3 against you, it was the sanctuary that really won the game because I just like found iteration and then just essentially went deeper there that way, right? And then
Yeah.
found more destruction.
I remembered. You've blind flipped Force to your Delver, but you should have
No, no,
just Sanctuary.
it was no. The force was
Oh,
known because
you knew that? Okay, but if you're
yeah,
gonna if you're gonna sanctuary iteration anyways, you might as well just sanctuary
mhm.
iteration, just reveal that anyways.
No, I agree. My
Yeah.
somebody in my chat pointed out, oh, it doesn't matter because you can just do it right now in case they have endurance or something, right? But the force was known from a cantrip earlier. I think it was a
Oh,
ponder.
I see. I see.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense then. Yeah. There's also like some weird sanctuary tricks involving Murktide with like exact combat damage or whatever, because you can get a +1/+1 counter on it essentially with sanctuary. Also,
Oh, right, right, right.
Snapcaster Mage on your spell also pumps Murktide. There's like a lot of really goofy things like that actually I've seen happen. I've come up with. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I've seen it myself where like I forget about it and then they like sanctuary for the last point of damage for Murktide to get across the finish line. So definitely very relevant.
yeah. So obviously 4 matches isn't a lot, but I feel like I haven't played a lot with this version. But I hate to
Mhm.
tell you, I still found myself never having the time to activate Elvish Reclaimer. Maybe it's just the way I play the deck that doesn't allow me that flexibility. Maybe I should be looking for that more. But I
But
mean,
I'll let you finish first.
yeah, I just found it hard to spare 2 mana. Like generally speaking, is my actual issue. So if you don't, if you feel like you can't spare 2 mana, then obviously Elvish Reclaimer is going to look not very good. Generally
Yeah, so I
speaking.
I think on that topic, I do want to say I think a lot of times it's harder for at least veteran elf players to play this version, especially against something like Delver where you don't feel like you have the time. So Brian Koval, Boston Roll, when he played this deck, he mentioned at the his conclusion, one heuristic he's not sure about was, am I supposed to just always fetch Cradle on 2? And then I answered, unless you're going off with Heritage Druid that turn, either with Glimpse or Visionary, the answer is almost always yes, actually,
I
because
see.
what so that's hard, I think, for longtime elf players to do because myself included when I first essentially built this deck, right? Because your natural instinct is to commit to the board, and you have to kind of unlearn that, if that makes sense.
Well, so one thing is I never actually had the Reclaimer on one, right? So
I
like
don't think you did, right?
so
So
like
that is actually right.
I actually think I would have adhered to that, but That's because I think the incremental value of 2 mana on turn 2 versus the incremental value of 2 mana on turn 4 or whatever, they're like varying. It's a lot better to sacrifice 2 mana on turn 2 for an enormous mana boost in the form of Gaia's Cradle on turn 2 than it is to do it later, and then like also be like more exposed to Wasteland or whatever, you know.
I would agree with that, yes. Like on especially when you go turn one on the play off a fetch and your
Yeah,
opponent just does not have force or removal, right? They just feel so far behind because you're gonna
yeah,
untap with Guy's Cradle on turn three, and the game is for all intents and purposes probably over.
yeah. It's just the way most Delver decks are designed right now. They have 6 1 mana removal or 5 1 mana removal spells and dazes and forces that. I guess if you're on the play, dazes out, but I
Right.
your reclaimer doesn't really get to that point that often, is what I would actually say. But I mean, it does happen a non-zero amount of the time, you know.
What it does do from a strategic standpoint is, from what I found, is it may deter your opponent from playing a threat on turn one, though, because you don't really want to allow the reclaimer to untap. But
Oh, I see. Yeah, because then they have to like burn a removal spell instead of playing their Delver or DRC or whatever.
right.
I
From a
see.
from a strategic standpoint, it tends to be relevant, even if they do kill the reclaimer on one or force it.
I see. Um. Okay. Well, that's interesting to know. Yeah. I guess it's in some sense it A like ports their mana that turn, and B is like a spell skite because
Yes, yes, that's probably a way to, describing that. One thing that you mentioned that I appreciate is you mentioned from a macro standpoint, knowing how what an elf win looks like and what a delver win looks like, and I think that's what a lot of players don't focus
right.
on enough, even outside of this matchup.
Yeah. Of course. Like I kind of feel like I've and basically with any deck, when I start playing it, I just write down how I think the deck is going to win and try to just
Hmm.
achieve those board states every time until I know
Hmm.
better. Like then, like on some certain subtle like gameplay things, I can figure out better after I practice more. But like we should just summarize. Like I think blue red wins either through like recurring iteration a million times and like actually killing everything, or uh Murktide hitting the elf player twice and like double bolt is like those are the most common ways to win. Of
Or,
course, you
or the three threats on turn two or something where they all flip,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
There's that
sure.
too, right?
Yeah, you could have like Delver into Delver and flip all of them, and then like your opponent's just auto dead. But or like DRC Delver DRC, like any combination of those, if they're all like online by turn two, then like your opponent's probably dead. Um, from the elf side, I kind of feel like it's pretty easy to imagine this. If the game goes really long in game one, elves is inherently favored because what's going to happen is eventually Shepherd's going to stick in either Critter Hoof or Shepherd activation or Natural Order or Zenith for Hoof will kill the opponent. So in game one, I think the elf standpoint is to just not get killed if possible. I mean, and that's what your sideboard plan encourages, right? Like not getting killed, because the
Yeah.
idea is the game. The longer the game goes on, the better it is
Hmm.
for the elf deck. So I think that mostly remains true in post board game, and you just side in a bunch of endurances because A, they're good blockers, and B, they sort of shut off the turbo Murktide aspect.
Yeah, I think I would agree with all what you just said right now. Like, especially game one when you know there's no sweepers, you essentially just play to the board, and then
Yeah.
one of two things can happen. Either the Delver has to waste time, burning removal on your one ones that you don't even care about,
Mm-hmm.
or two, they neglect it, and then you just like combo kill them, right?
Yeah, it, I I mean obviously Glimpse is worse in this deck, but I think in this deck Glimpse is just like either concentrate or divination most of the time, right?
I think it depends. In this matchup, it's what I found is it's the elf version of expressive iteration. So oftentimes you get to the mid game and you're drawing a three for all intents and purposes. In other
Mm-hmm.
matchups, especially against control, you can still draw your whole deck. More rare
I
just
see.
against
I see.
yeah, because against control, you actually have the time to turn 1 Reclaimer, turn 2 Cradle, right? And then turn 3, now the shields are like way down essentially for the control player. That makes sense.
Yeah, I see. Um. Anyways, just to check, how were you sideboarding with elves versus blue red?
With this list that we both, so I think what we did was pretty nice because we both played the exact same 75.
Yeah.
What I did was I cut the entire natural order package, and the
Sure.
logic is if you have natural order in your opening hand, it's almost as bad as a mulligan. And if you have like a hoof, it is essentially a mulligan.
Right.
And I cut the entire natural order package plus collective, and then so it's also this is also in Jurg's Google Docs, and I boarded in the full set of endurances, so that's three, the two
Right.
snuff outs, and then the assassin's trope because essentially I want to go low to the ground, and then my logic is I think if I can keep up with the Delver player early, I should be favored in the late game. That's less true now because of iteration when both sides are top decking, but still I think for the most part accurate.
I think one thing that's also interesting is I think Mystic Sanctuary. Before I didn't have it in for selves, and then now I'm just like, it's obviously correct to have it in my deck for the matchup.
I
Uh,
agree.
and like same for Snapcaster Mage. So the
Hmm.
endurance instantly hating the graveyard, both for Murktide and for that sort of stuff, actually matters a lot as well. So
Hmm. Yeah, one thing that came up also is I mentioned with endurances, I will rarely evoke it because I just don't.
sure,
Depending on the number of cards on the opponent's hand, I think you are unlikely to win if you will be behind on cards if you have to revoke it. Now, if you're already on cards, that's a different story. But that is my personal preference. I don't know how much if you mentioned that at all or not.
I I don't think I'm trying to evoke it versus them because I think the creature matters a lot as well. I
Agreed.
think it's not even about the card disadvantage for me. I think just a three
Mhm.
four reach creature is worth so much. Like
Right, right.
because
Yeah,
in the
there was
games,
that one game where I just like flooded 3/4s on the board, and it was just really problematic for you.
yeah, I don't think I could ever win that game. Pretty much, I basically told my chat the way I could win that game was if literally on the turn you did all of that. If I like iterationed into
All bird or something. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. It had to be a really good iteration, and I had to draw iteration, so that didn't happen. So yeah, so I think that's about what I have for this matchup, and I think a lot of interesting things came up. You know, uh, I feel like did we see the full spectrum of tricks from both sides? Like weird,
What do you mean by trips?
I don't know, like weird play scenarios that you don't often see. Trying to remember.
Um, I think we saw how games typically play out, and I think it's kind of nice in this case too because we both won one from each side.
Hmm.
So I think there's good data there because I think for sure I would be more obviously comfortable playing from the elf side, and I think I mean I don't want to speak for sure, but I would guess you're more comfortable playing from the Delver side. But what I did notice though, playing from the other side, the floor probably for the blue red side is just so much higher because there's
Oh
no way
yeah.
I'm as good a player as you, and I just like won one match where I just just did Delver things so to speak, to put it
Well,
bluntly.
it's just because like the power level of those cards is like so high that like the deck inherently is propped up by that. So that's
Hmm.
what you're experiencing. And like for that reason, I think that deck is actually really good. Like just to recommend to anyone because like I mean
Agreed.
the cards are broken and like I personally don't see a reason to play anything else until something else happens. Not that something should happen. It's just I personally will probably not do anything else for now.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think another thing I want to mention is also when I made the game, the mistake match one round game number two, like that. I think it was one I mentioned earlier where I should have played endurance. It would probably draw out the force in that situation, and I could slam Gris. What is potentially obvious to me and you might not be obvious to the audience is from the elf perspective, I feel you almost have to play not it maybe not 100%, but you have to get at least 90 to 95. Like, and with Delver, I think you have to only get maybe to 70, especially in this matchup. What are your thoughts on that?
Um,
Especially against good players.
yeah, I think I sort of see what you're saying, but I think you could make that argument for any deck versus a good player. So I'm not sure if I really can get behind the sentiment. I mean, I
Sure.
understand what you're trying to say. I think what
Mhm.
you're saying is, I think what you're actually saying is it's more straightforward to play the blue red deck than it is the elf deck, is what you're actually trying to say.
I would agree with that. But yeah, that's fair. I would agree with that. At least that statement standalone. But because I've found out, like, people who ask me about who are elf players, and they ask me, it's like, man, I don't know how you, because my win rate against blue red personally is at the moment like 60%. And
Mm-hmm.
like I said, I don't know if I mentioned this to you. I think I mentioned this on my stream earlier. The win rate for elves in challenges right now is like 30% against blue red, and I
Yeah.
think I think what's happening is either the blue red player is just a better player. I mean, I don't know if that's the case or not, or just they're making less mistakes because the deck is easier to play, or a combination of both. But I feel like the elf player is definitely really punished for mistakes, and even Jurg, he himself said his win rate right now in big events is only 27%, and um, I think yeah. So I'll let you just address that for a second.
Um. Yeah. It's. I don't know. I think a part of it is that it's also probably somewhat draw dependent, and the blue red deck basically doesn't really have bad draws because all of the cards like stabilize the draw, right? Whereas
Yeah,
like
yeah, for sure.
it the only way the elves deck can smooth out its draw is by drawing more cards or having an OAT in the opener. So that's just
Right.
like less of those copies of cards make it harder to do that. So I think in reality is maybe part of the not so good win rate is you're seeing the inherent variance in a non blue deck is how I would put it best.
I can see that, especially if the elf player doesn't know when to mulligan certain hands. So that's probably a good point. I think what I can imagine happening then is like you keep a more high variant hand, and then instead of mulliganing when you're supposed to, which I can see a less experienced elf player not making that correct judgment call.
Right. So yeah.
All right. Go ahead.
Sorry. I was just about to say, for those of you who are watching the stream on my side slash watching on Newton's side, are there any other changes you're thinking about testing in the near future, based on metagame adjustments? Or I'm kind of curious personally.
I know this is not from Chad, but I guess one question I would defer to you on this is: do you like Submerge or End of Festivities better from your side?
For specifically the elf matchup,
Yes, or in general, both actually.
I mean they're different cards, so I don't know how to really answer that. Like, I mean,
I guess what about in the elf matchup then?
in the elf matchup, I think end is slightly better
Hmm.
if you only wanted to dedicate a certain amount. The reason I have both is because I want submerge as coverage versus like Knight of the Reliquary and shit like that. You know, like
And Dark Depths, right?
well, I mean, I'm gonna point this out to everyone. If you try to
Hmm.
submerge certain depths players, it doesn't work that well because they can actually leave themselves with no forests. So
Hmm.
it like you cited it, of course, but it's not always going to be that reliable. I just think
Right,
having
right.
one submerge is good, and obviously it is good in the elves matchup. I'm just saying I think the value over replacement for submerge versus end the festivities, the value over replacement for end the festivities is much higher.
Interesting. Okay, I guess on that topic, what about End versus Rough? Is
Okay,
there a reason why you want to
there
play
actually
XT?
is a reason. If I expected the field to be all death and taxes, I would just play two then festivities and
Hmm.
no rough tumble. But because I
Uh-huh.
expect certain people to play Reclaimer Elves, the fact that Ruff can kill Reclaimer plus another elf on turn 2 is actually worth a lot to me.
Oh, so it's really just a specific card for elves. Then is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, and there's no more awkwardness with your own Ragavan, so like it's kind of just all upside to me to just play Rough Tumble instead of the second end. And I also think there's just like you can get into situations where if you can like rough, Sanctuary back rough, brainstorm the rough in your hand, cast it again to even kill the 3/4 reclaimers.
That makes sense. Actually, that's good to know. I did not realize what's called that was specifically to hedge in the direction of elves, but good to know. I just assumed that there was like other entities that you cared about from other archetypes.
There's not
But
that many. Like, I mean, killing Solitude is nice, I guess, but like,
mhm.
it for what it's worth, you're getting solituded and then they're staying in play. You're probably losing that game by a lot already. Is how I
I
would
would
put
agree
it.
with. I
Um,
would agree.
the the I mean this is a bit of digression, but the way that the blue red versus D&T matchup functions
Mhm.
nowadays is a lot different. I usually just play Protect the Queen on Murktide because this is the easiest way
Uh-huh.
to beat them. I guess that's actually kind of similar to Elves, but the difference is D&T can't combo kill you. What they can
Mhm.
do is just try to grind you with like a million annoying 2-for-1s instead. So that's why the easiest way to beat them is to just like, you know, make an 8/8 flyer on turn 3 and just force every plow or solitude. And that
That
like
actually good.
sorry. It costs a lot of cards, but really like I don't really care how many cards I have if they're dead and I have 0 cards.
I mean, that's very fair, and that actually makes a lot of sense too because given what you said about how you can do that to a certain extent against elves, but they can combo kill you. I think that's actually brings up a good point that I think especially since I've watched, I think one of the images that Yerg and other elf players sent to me recently, one thing that they I think have a hard time doing is um, against control, you're always the aggressor, so to speak. You're always being proactive. Against combo, you're always kind of reactive, like hold Reclaimer up, play Thoughtseize, etc.
Mm-hmm.
I think with the tempo matchups against Delver specifically, I think what a lot of elf players are having trouble with is knowing when you need to just forget about answering the Delver threat and just go wide. And because once a Murktide sticks, you can't worry about like their graveyard or whatever anymore. You have to kind
No,
of
no,
commit to yeah.
no.
And I
Well,
see people thinking about bog and whatnot, and I just think you're just playing too defensively.
no. Once like a 6/6 Murktide's in play, all bets are off. You should just try to kill them or like get enough blockers to block. But I don't really like
Right,
the
right,
like mass block perspective because that's too easy to have it go wrong.
right.
Personally, um,
Yeah, yeah. I think the thing is like when that happens, what I usually tell people is you have to get Reclaimer. You have to rotate essentially for Cradle and hope to go wide and kill them with like Shepherd activation or something like that, or find the Grist, right?
right, yeah. Um, all right. I think that was a pretty good coverage. I don't really have anything else or any other thoughts on the matchup. Um, yeah. So do you want to tell my chat where they can find you? Yeah, I know you have a Discord. Uh, I know you have a Twitch. So now's the time for you to plug it.
Sure. I'll go. Should I? Do you want me to just post it on your
No,
chat?
just say it first, then post it.
Sure. What's it called? I have a Patreon that you can find from my Twitter. My Twitter is just Hello Newton. What else? So I have a Patreon that's like $5 subscription per month, and then my Twitter. I have a Discord that is specific for this archetype, but even if you play the traditional build, for instance, I've had a couple of like Fluffy 21 or in the past Testacular has posted a lot in my Discord, and then it's just good conversation regardless of which archetype you want to play. Also, I post my YouTube, and I'm sure Jarvis will do the same with this. So you can find me on Hello Noon with YouTube as well.
All right. Cool. So if you want to support Newton, that's how you can. Um,
Also, quick plug for Jarvis. For those who don't know, I consider Jarvis, who's still watching my stream, I consider Jarvis one probably the best player I know personally in regards to overall Magic, and his specialties. While he can do, he can play different archetypes, like regardless of format and whatnot. But if you're interested in lands content, I know he has a Patreon, and it comes with free coaching. Not free, but the Patreon subscription comes with coaching session as well for the lands archetype. If you want to quickly plug that here on my stream, or just mention a little bit about that, go ahead,
Yeah,
John.
sure. So to summarize that one real quick, uh, currently the Patreon, uh, it's $15 per month to get access to a 30-page lands guide that I wrote. I haven't updated it in a little bit. I probably am going to do a relatively big update soon. But if you pay a little bit more, you can get a 2-hour session with me about lands or about some other legacy deck if you really want to do that. I feel pretty confident that I can learn or give good advice on most of the decks in Legacy. Uh, because I do try a lot of decks. I think generally what I said in the past is I think if you don't try every deck at least once, you're probably missing out on some diamonds in the rough relatively often. Is how I would put it the best.
Not to
Uh,
mention the best way to know how to beat a certain matchup is to play from the other side too, as Jarvis hinted at
yeah,
earlier.
but also just like if you play a lot of decks, it's actually pretty easy. It's easier to pick up new decks faster. Is another way of putting it.
Yep, I totally agree. One thing I want to also mention is, for those who don't know, Jarvis, I actually went to Jarvis for tutoring or a coaching session when I was essentially picking limited code for the Mox event. And when I say code, I mean have never drafted in my life outside of Cube. So Jarvis was able to turn me to a 2-1 finish in the Mox event in only, I think, I forget how many sessions we had, but it was less than, I had a month to prep, and I think we only had like 2 or 3 sessions.
Yeah, I mean, you obviously did a lot of work. Like you went on that god account and burnt all of the play points multiple times or something like that. I mean, obviously reps matter, but there's also a significant difference between league play than pod play because it. I mean, I'm not gonna rant about this too much, but the fact is, league drafts and pod drafts are very different. Um, you can see this at the PT level now that they're coming back.
Mhm.
Praise Jesus or whatever you want to say about that because I love paper magic and I'm going to be trying pretty hard to qualify for that one. But uh yeah, I do love booster draft and I'm trying to get people to draft IRL now and then, real sets. Um yeah, I think just the replayability of limited is one of the big factors for me because
Mhm.
obviously like constructed formats can get stale, but every time you sit down at a new booster draft with different people, you don't really know how it's going to go, because people
Mhm.
always have different opinions. You could just be in a weird seat to draft some deck that no one's ever seen before,
Mhm.
stuff like that. Although, like, I think for us, I advise you not to draft any really weird decks because that requires a lot of like out of the box. Like, you have to be a Sam Black sometimes to draft those weird decks, not a Reed Duke is how I would put it.
That makes sense. Yep, I totally want to shout out Jarvis for doing this with me. Uh, when I had this idea to do, and obviously I will be willing to do it with other people as well, but given that blue red is the most popular matchup, I wanted to do this spotlight, so to speak, from both sides. And I personally went to Jarvis because one, he's the best player I know, and two, because he's played at least both sides. Elves lesser recently, but to an extent before. And I think the way I'll put it is I'm more scared. And of course, if you're the way to get better is to play people just as good or slightly better than you. And I would be more scared to run into Jarvis than like another really high profile, blue red player because I think Jarvis knowing how elves ticks at least to some extent is a big deal.
Yeah. and obviously, like, we can't really undersell your capabilities with elves. I mean, sometimes I think to myself that you're winning less than you should in Legacy because you choose to play this deck rather than blue red, but that's a different story. I've definitely had this conversation with you because I think you are a
Yes, for
talented
sure.
player, but I sometimes think that you just like this deck too much. So, not to throw shade on you. I think it's just I
No, no, no.
think
It's
I
actually a compliment. Thank
yeah,
you.
I think it's just the fact of the matter is I felt like you played those games fine, and if you just played this deck more often, you would just realize how stupid this deck is, and you'd win like maybe you would even win more, even in the mirrors, because the mirrors like remember how I was saying that games are either ended on turn 4 or turn 20? I happen
Yeah,
to think the turn 20 case is a lot more frequent than the turn 4 case. So what that
makes
actually
sense.
means is the better player usually wins those 20 turn games.
That actually makes a lot of sense.
So
And on that note, actually, like I said, I didn't want to be completely cold coming today because I'm not used to like the ponder heuristics in terms of putting
yeah,
cards back. Because I don't want to misclick by accident in our matches and just
sure.
have like a game thrown away. But when I ran it through the league, it was pretty dumb how many games I just won on the power of like, oh, this deck just has all the answers, and your deck, it has weaknesses, and I don't really have weaknesses. If that makes sense.
Yeah, because it's like a fair deck that has card advantage, so it's really hard
Mm-hmm.
to attack, and it can also provide a fast clock. So it's very malleable, is how I would put it. It's like
Mm-hmm.
I would actually describe it as a Jun deck that doesn't have the Jun weaknesses.
Yeah, that makes sense. You're like a Jun deck, but you get to play Force of Will, and you get to have
Yeah,
more consistency with your cantrips.
yeah. Anyways, my throat is really starting to kill me more because I've had a pretty bad cough the last few days. So I think I'm about ready to call it myself. Are you going to be playing a little bit more after this, or are you done?
I'm gonna be what's going go eating dinner right now,
Okay,
but
sure.
I just want to thank you again for doing
Yep,
this with me. I
yep,
think there's no other questions, so you want to just call it?
yep. Um, Thanks everyone, and thanks Newton for asking me to do this. And I hope everyone got good information out of it. So
All right.
we'll see y'all next
Oh,
time.
all right. See you guys. Thank you.